Arthur Laffer, as an American economist, once said, without China, there is no Walmart. And without Walmart, there is no middle class and lower class prosperity in the United States. Keep this in mind as we discuss today the skyrocketed deficits between the US and China and what it means to you. My name is Dr. David Oualaalou.
And my name is Dr. Ross Stewart.
And you are watching Geopolitics in Conflict.
David, did you know that there's a trade war between China and the United States?
Oh, really?
Really? And the whole world is watching as Trump leaves office, and they're watching to see how Biden is going to continue or change the policies of the United States toward China. We know that there is a real difference between the tariffs and what Biden and what Trump had in mind and the reality. Give us some numbers.
Well, that's correct. The Trump administration has imposed about $360 billion on Chinese, those are tariffs on Chinese goods. But the interesting thing is just within last year, the deficits, the US-China deficits skyrocketed high because China has added to the deficit to the US by about $75 billion. Which means that China exports about 46% more goods the last year than it did the year before.
It's hard to call the Trump policy a success.
No, it's not. In this case, the policy failed. It failed because if the Trump administration has said that they're going to impose the $360 billion on Chinese goods, it certainly didn't succeed. So, otherwise, how would you explain this increase in the trade deficits between the two countries?
You know, consumers have demanded more Chinese products. And with the shutdown, a whole lot of American services, you couldn't get them. And people had discretionary money, so they bought Chinese products.
Well, that's correct, because it became easier. You just, go online and order whatever you need. And that's what fueled the spending or actually the sale of the Chinese goods in the US market, but also because they are also cheaper to get to this. But there is a much bigger picture to all this. As we always stated before, the sheer market of the Chinese economy. But there are two main priorities for China that we need to keep in mind as we discuss this trade deficit increase. The two priorities are technological dominance or independence, that is, and the supply chain. Those are the two main issues that China is vehemently moving towards wanting to achieve. And go ahead.
There's news behind the news here. And because we have multiple sources, including international sources, part of the news is, well, how come China is so hell-bent on getting Taiwan?
Well, that's not only because Taiwan is considered part of China, even though it's in sort of a province that it can self-rule, but also Taiwan is known for semiconducting business. And China's objective in the long term is to gain independence from depending on the United States for the semiconducting business. And this is why China wants to move into that direction by securing access to semiconducting within its own region.
We know that the Chinese Communist Party, from its very inception, wanted real economic independence. And when Trump said, well, let's punish them by limiting semiconductor sales, it was a boomerang arrow.
Yeah, it just didn't work, because if you recall when we talked about the ASEAN meeting and the the signing ceremony in which China signed along with other 15 members, the 10 members of the ASEAN summits that took place, but also the additional 5 countries that attended: South Korea, Japan, Australia, and China. When they signed that RCEP agreements, that opened up the market for China as far as the supply chain, because now what China is going to be doing is they can get whatever they want from within the region, so they don't need the United States anymore. They are trying to decouple slowly, and they are succeeding into achieving that objective.
With the billions of dollars, or more billions of won, that the Chinese Communist Party has invested in semiconductors, it seems easier just to get them from one of their provinces.
That is correct. They've been trying for years, and they have not succeeded the way they wanted to. But now they are at a level where they feel comfortable enough to do it on its own. Remember, this comes on the heels of China's quantum computing giant leap. This comes also on the heel of the 5G and 6G technology.
And on the heels of the digital yuan.
The digital yuan. So all these elements, when you put them together, it's just a sort of, as an investor, you will be thinking in terms of where this is going. So from a business perspective, you're going to have to see the big picture.
You have to have the news behind the news. What's really going on here? And then you add Hong Kong into the mix. Because it looked like Taiwan, this whole thing was just irrational. It wasn't. Then you take a look at Hong Kong, and which was really, the currency there was the dollar. With the digital yuan, guess what?
Yeah, that's just going to change the dynamics.
And so if they own Hong Kong, now they can force the digital yuan and the dollar out,
which complete autonomy from the U.S. dominance per se. So, and this is one of the things we usually advise our clients, especially the investors, to think in terms of, you're going to have to understand the implications of the geopolitical implications that is on the business decisions that you're going to be making. And because when it comes down to China, we're all seeing where it's going. And
what we see is a plan within a plan. And you can't count on the surface news to give you any real useful information about what's going on here.
No, not necessarily, because you got to remember, for China doesn't. The way to understand China is China doesn't jump.
Right.
China takes one step at a time. So they think methodically. Of course, they don't think within the next quarter. They think of the next 20, 25 years, next 30 years or so. That's how they operate, even within their, for example, decision-making process. When the Communist Party get together, all the policymakers and all that get together with the chair, or they deliberate on the issues for hours and hours and hours. And once they reach consensus, the chair, in this case Xi, we said, is everybody okay with the consensus? And everybody says, yes, we are. Then once they make that decision, they move forward. So now if you outside the meeting say, well, I didn't like that, then you're breaking protocol.
I've conducted any number of executive meetings where everyone gets their say. And at the end of the meeting, it's all agreed that no matter what position you came in with, you lock arms and we go forward with the agreed upon agenda. That works magnificently because it is a consistent plan without distractors saying, no, I'm going to sabotage this because it's not my plan. And just this morning, the Chinese announced that they have a plan to cut their carbon emissions enormously by 2060. That shows you how far out these people are planning things. And it looked like a very solid plan. And you can tell by what's going on in Saudi Arabia, you can tell what's going on with the Russian gas deal. They're serious about accomplishing it by that time. Mm-hmm. They say, we're going to be the leader in no carbon footprint. Mm-hmm. Well, that's impressive.
Yeah, they certainly think long term. And this is that's what's been working for them, economically speaking, to move the country forward. And apparently they are succeeding into this because, remember, by 2025, they want most of the product to be Chinese. By 2030, they want to be the leading technological country in the world. And by 2049, they want to dominate the entire sectors per se. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but rather it's just to highlight that you have to have a plan and a strategy, because in their case, because their government system is not like ours, they don't have to be dealing with the elections the next 4 years or Congress in 2 years. They don't have those issues. So they have enough time to plan accordingly for long term.
The pandemic, I was talking yesterday to some people who just returned from China.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, because I was curious about the mask, they said, no one's wearing a mask there. It's business as usual. And I said, how's that possible? And they said, because they've got it organized so well that any small outbreak, they send an army in to quarantine, to inoculate, to treat the people. And so their economy is recovering more dramatically rapidly. No matter what the news is telling you, these people are on the ground reporting to me directly, this is what's happening.
Yeah. Well, that certainly has helped. The reason why their economy is moving forward is because they are not dealing with the pandemic like we do here in the U.S.
It's not a political football there.
It's not, that's for sure. Because
here it certainly is.
It harmed, you're looking at a 42% of small businesses not coming back here in the U.S. And that's devastating, because small businesses is what sustain the American economy. I mean, we're not going to get political here as far as what Wall Street is doing or what Congress is doing. We all know how corrupted both entities are. But just to go back to the topic as far as what China's thinking in the long term, yes, dealing with the pandemic, that they moved beyond it is what helped their economy to move forward, and they want to take advantage of this opportunity.
How much do you think that U.S. government policy can actually dictate what happens to trade, especially with China?
No, there won't be they can't influence that much, because we looked at it when President Trump imposed the tariffs on the China. It didn't work. It failed. Because both economies are interlocked per se.
Right.
We depend so much on China's goods. I mean, can you imagine if prices here in the U.S. goes up for commodities for average citizens to buy, let's say, whatever, an item that costs $20, you end up having to pay $100 for it. We're already dealing with economic outcome or the hardships of the pandemic. Then you add the increase in prices, they're just not going to settle well.
And too often you can't get a commodity that is anything but Chinese made. I've searched for things online sometimes, and there's nothing else available.
Yeah,
They've cornered so many markets.
It's a big market. That's all I can say. I mean, we can't ignore it. It's to those who argue China is the danger and all that, that's nonsense. That is nonsense. It's a reality and fact we need to accept and figure out a way how we're gonna coexist with it.
Really, no other reasonable choice. For our viewers, what would you say the impact in their lives of this is?
Well, this is now going to be as far as what the next U.S. administration is going to do. Now, the only option that is left for the Biden administration is some sort of rapprochement with China regarding the trade negotiations. I do believe, and this is my personal opinion, that the Biden administration wants to hit the ground running when it comes down to trade with China, because they need to solve these issues. Otherwise, if the prices start to go up,
now we have a major problem with American consumers.
Yeah, and I am certain the Biden administration will want that.
So I think the bottom line here is that we can expect some grand accommodation with the Chinese.
I will concur to that statement, that's for sure.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Also, be sure to check our other videos. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
And as always, stay informed. Till next time.